I'm interviewing Mr. Noel Hall in March 2004 about his experiences during the Kokoda campaign with the 39th Battalion. If we start at the beginning, can you talk about the formation of the 39th Battalion?
Well, the 39th Australian Infantry Battalion of 1941-43. The 24th 39th Battalion was disbanded as such on the 30th of September 1941 at midnight. It was then to be known as the 24th Infantry Battalion. A new battalion was to be formed with volunteers from the 3rd Military District, and if that was not possible, to be increased from 4th Military District for special service in the 8th Military District. The battalion would then go into training at Darley AIF Training Brigade Headquarters, and then at the completion of its training will be moved to its overseas posting. I endeavoured after the outbreak of war to join various AIF units and RAF. In each case, it was not allowed because of the number of schools and courses I had done in between prior to the war, qualified for different subjects. They were keeping me as an instructor. However, on one occasion when commanding officer and adjutant had to go to the field for training, the CO asked me to take over as assistant adjutant while he was away. I had a dose of the flu and he didn't want me to get out into the weather, and he wanted somebody capable of doing it. The adjutants were. So I was doing this duty in the headquarters at the Road Camp, when a signal came in advising of the formation of the new 39th. I'd always worn the colour patch. I thought, now this is an opportunity to get into this new unit. I filled out a volunteer application for the unit, and approved of it as acting adjutant and sent it away. The commanding officer of the new unit, Lieutenant Colonel Hugh Conlon, he came up a day or so and saw me, and he was quite happy to take me in. However, when the commanding officer of 24th Battalion came back home about 2 o'clock in the morning, he knocked on the tent. He said, "Hall, are you in there?" I said, "Yes, sir." "You dissatisfied with my command?" "No, sir." "Why?" "You're advertising to try and join and advised to try and join this new mob." And I thought, I'd always worn the 39th Battalion colour patch. I thought I might as well continue to do so. He said, "Well, we'll see you about that in the morning. I'll see you in the office." So that's how I came to join the 39th Battalion.
So he didn't put up any more objections?
He didn't put any other. No, as a matter of fact, he and Hugh Conlon and I and the brigade medical officer all spent until 12 o'clock that night in the officers' mess. But
so you talked about the colour patch.
Yeah. What
was the uniform and the colour patch like in the early days?
Well, the 39th Battalion colour patch is an oval with a brown over red. The red was the brigade colour and the brown was a unit colour. And it differed in those days from the AIF, but there was no 39th Battalion formed in the AIF. But the AIF colour patches had a grey background and the other patch on top of it. Later, after the Battle of Ishirava, our colour patch was changed to include the grey background. The uniform was a bit of a problem because the authorities had not previously had to dress an independent unit of this nature for this type of occupation. and they dressed us in what was the uniform of the 2nd Battalions in the British Army. The British Army has a regiment. 1st Battalion is the active service regiment. The reinforcement battalion goes with them on their overseas postings, and the reinforcements to that 1st Battalion come from the 2nd Battalion in the British Army, or did. We had no such arrangement in Australia. So they dressed us in the British tropical uniform. A patrol-necked tunic for the other ranks, in khaki drill, or light khaki colour, shorts, long socks, short puttees, ordinary infantry boots. Boots on the quartermaster's store list as boots ankle brown. And the equipment was a standard 1937 type equipment, which was a khaki colour. It was worn by the AIF and all the other units, except mounted units, which wore a bandolier type instead of pouches. The underneath your tunic was rather handy because you didn't have to wear a shirt. You could have worn a singlet. However, the tunic was hot. And when we got to New Guinea, most of the troops were seen going about their business dressed in khaki shirts and shorts, long socks, short puttees, and boots ankle brown. However, nobody could find the tunics because they'd given these away, and
to whom?
probably to the local natives, but it was much more comfortable in the shirt and shorts than it was with the tunic. However, the colour patch was worn on the hat band on the right side. Today they wear a hat band with a colour patch on the right, I'm not sure whether it's the right or left side they wear it now. They wear a rising sun badge on the side that turns up, and so did we. But they also now wear a unit badge in the front of the hat. But the only people who wore the unit badge in front of the hat in those days, our day, were the New Guinea Volunteer Rifles and certain special units of that nature. Some commandos.
Do you believe the uniform, apart from the shirts that you've said, do you believe the uniform was effective for the service that it was meant to see?
No, I don't. We'll start off, shorts were comfortable, but shorts leave too much skin for the mosquitoes to attack. And puttees were a humbug. Later, the uniform was altered to include in our case, leggings, artillery, and what used to be termed Bombay bloomers, which are something like the people that they call cycling trousers. You know, like the women wear them sometimes. A 3/4 length.
Oh, pedal pushers.
Pedal pushers, but they had large bottoms on the trousers so they could be folded quickly and make shorts buttoned up at the top near the waistband, and they made allegedly a short. But then of course you had the short of double thickness, which was only half intended to shape. And for me they were a nuisance. I disliked them intensely because they tended to shape me behind the knees. So, and I also wore Canadian long lace-up boots when I was there in New Guinea. So, with a bit al fresco for a start off. There's a photograph of the unit moving in out to McDonald's corner, and they were wearing Bombay bloomers, and the unit then has complete equipment as it wore in New Guinea. Those photographs have been given to the history, and I can readily see what the uniform was like. However, our khaki drill uniform, particularly after a little exposure and a little washing in the tropical sunshine, became very light in colour and that stood out as a great contrast against the dark green of the jungle. So all sorts of things were done to try and change that. They got tubs and they put green dye in it, and we dunked the uniform into that to try and make it green. Only partly successful. What it did do was camouflage the person inside the uniform because it washed off on it. And you had jungle green, you had green uniforms and green skin. And
but where would you get dye?
We had to get it sent up specially.
Oh, right.
And then before that, it was customary to take an old shirt and dunk it in the mud. And old pants and dunked them in the mud, and if you did that, at least it didn't stand out so glaringly against the jungle. The hat didn't change, the felt hat, that is, quartermaster's terminology, hats were felt. That didn't get much of a change. However, we also had the steel helmet, and there's an interesting point about that. All of the 39th Battalion steel helmets were camouflage on issue. Each company, the camouflage was changed around a little bit. So it was green and the yellowish colour, and the yellow patches on it were in a different place, so that you could tell from the helmet what company the troop belonged to. This became of some use, but then when it got into the jungle hit the steel helmet, and like rain on a tin roof, it only made a noise. And so we very rarely wore the helmet. The mortar people wore a helmet because that was added protection to them in case of a drop shot on the mortar. Most of the others did not wear a helmet.
But you had to carry it with you.
Yes, you had to have the helmet.
The helmet was issued in Darley, or when you got there?
Issued before we went. And when we left to go overseas, the embarkation number was in a cart on the helmet. They put it painted on the helmet. And we wore the helmet when we went on board a boat. It was an easy place to put a chalk mark on the front of the helmet. You could see the number, the embarkation number, and knew where the troop had to be put. And the freeze of handling, really. My helmet at the moment is sitting in the Queenscliff Museum. It's only on temporary loan. And I was told the other day that it looked a bit battered. I said, now remember, that helmet was on my head when that got battered.
Can you tell us about the trip to New Guinea?
Yeah.
You go on with your helmets, but what about the trip to New Guinea? From Melbourne? From
Melbourne. Actually on Boxing morning, 1941, the Valley was 0400 hours. We got up at that time, got all our equipment in the marching order, put it on, went down by truck to the Bacchus Marsh railway station. We lined up there and there were two troop trains. The first one was filled, moved straight off through the North Melbourne Loop to Albury, where we had to change trains because in those days there was a different rail standard between Victoria and New South Wales. And we moved straight up then to the Woolloomooloo dock. The other train went down through Geelong, where the troops were given a breakfast at Geelong, and then moved up, came in behind our train, up at Woolloomooloo. They moved off the train up onto Aquitania via a ferry boat. Very few of us went straight up to the Aquitania off the Woolloomooloo dock. The others, it was too difficult on dock. They put them onto a ferry boat, and the ferry boat took them out to Aquitania, which was laying out in the roads in Sydney Harbour. Then they went aboard the ship there. They went down to as far as H deck, which was well below the waterline. It was a very smooth passage, except for those sitting situated down below. The ship tended to roll on the propeller motion, so it would rise 4 feet, sway to the starboard 4 feet, go down 4 feet, swing back to port about 8 feet to go up, and this movement did not help the people who were tending to get seasick. But otherwise it was a very quiet and peaceful trip over to New Guinea until we got into the Coral Sea. In the Coral Sea there was a submarine alert, and the members from the 39th as gunnery officers, Sam Templeton, Ted Money and myself. I was the gunnery officer on watch when the alert took place, and advised the officer of the watch that the HMS, I don't know whether it was HMNZ at that time, I think it was just HMS. I don't think that New Zealand had claimed it at that time. Was leading the convoy. She had the devices for submarine detection, and she put out enemy contact flag. So the convoy dispersed and the cruisers went into action. After the 3rd or 4th depth charge dropped, these depth charges were pattern dropped by the cruisers. They all formed line of beam, pattern drop. But apparently it was successful. The convoy resumed course and speed, 12 knots from their previous high speed, and moved up, coming to New Guinea from the Samurai end and coming up the coast. Once we came into artillery range of New Guinea, the cruisers all swung their guns outboard and covered the whole approach right up to Moresby. When we got to Moresby, the Aquitania was unable to get through the Battalion Passage because her draft was too great. So she hove to outside the Battalion Passage, and we went ashore. Either someone there, the rest in ship's lifeboats towed behind the pinnace, like the Gallipoli landing. We went to the pier. Arriving there, we went straight off the pier and what do you call it? With full kit, wearing full kit anyhow. We had to march then to what was later we found out was the 7 mile zone. But the 7 mile did not take in all the bends and curves down through the Keeler Beach and the way we marched into the place. So it was quite late in the evening and night by the time we got into the strip for the first night. That's where we bivouacked the first night.
You mentioned the convoy going up, but what ships were in the convoy? Right,
ships in the convoy were, from the warship point of view, Chilitan front, the Australia to starboard, Perth to port, Waterhen over on the starboard, well out to starboard on starboard flank. The other ships were the British transport Serpentine, and just offhand I can't remember the name of the big Scandinavian ship that was a new ship that was carrying most of our stores and equipment. So 3 of us, three ships, not warships. The Aquitania, who was an auxiliary cruiser, had 3,000 troops on board. The Serpentine, I don't think had any troops. I might have had a couple of caretaker troops. It had its own crew, of course, but it could do no more than 12 knots. And there were a number of rune signals sent on the way up to try and get it to increase speed, but it was unable to increase speed.
What about the Mary and the Elizabeth?
Now, Mary and Elizabeth were in harbour, Sydney Harbour when we were in there. When we left Sydney Harbour, Elizabeth and Mary left with the convoy through the heads. They preceded the convoy through the heads. They turned off to Fremantle and went unescorted to Fremantle. We turned off on our way then out into the Pacific. We were protected by the minesweepers as well until we got off the Pacific step, and then only the cruisers and our two ships were with the Aquitania.
So what flags would the Mary and the Elizabeth be flying? They're just...
Oh, Mary and Elizabeth were flying white ensign, British white ensign.
Oh. You've also said that you were the gunnery officer.
Yeah.
How come you became appointed a gunnery officer? A ship of that
Aquitania had no personnel to man the ship's artillery or machine guns. So they picked as gunnery officers Captain Sam Temple, ex-Royal Navy, myself and Ted Mundy, both long experience in machine gun handling and instruments which were similar to the artillery instruments. So we became gunnery officers. The anti-aircraft gun was manned by the 23rd Anti-Aircraft, which was travelling with us. Major armament aft, 4.7 aft, also manned by 23rd Anti-Aircraft, who were familiar artillery officers and men. That's the reason for doing that. The ship, Aquitania, had brought out Italian prisoners of war before that, and she was available then and that's why I think we probably got her for return.
The usefulness of the training that you did in Melbourne, in Darley, how successful was that, or how effective was that for what you were coming from?
The length of time we had, the unit as it was formed really from the 1st of October, the Japanese declared, or undeclared, they had their war start on the 7th of December. The unit had practically no time to get any further into the training than section drill. Technically, they were generally very sound because the older members had had a lot of technical training on the equipment, but there'd been no tactical training. So when we got to New Guinea, we were able to handle all the various types of equipment, but we had no tactical training, nor did we have a chance to be trained early on, because there were no labourers there available for unloading ships or for digging slit trenches, for doing the other manual tasks around the town. Being an independent battalion, the 30th Brigade, as it was going to be known, was hardly formed, and consequently the Japanese were hurrying us up a little bit by coming down the way they did, because we then had to give up any thought of training, but learn in action, which really, in hindsight, was perhaps an advantage, because when the unit reached Kokoda and places of that nature, and the Japanese came down, they so greatly outnumbered us that the only way the unit could engage them at all was to fire on them and then get away for another position. Consequently, that was perhaps the best tactic that could have been done, because the Japanese didn't know how many there were of us or where we were. And so that slowed them up considerably. In fact, in their diary, one of the Japanese diaries recorded that they appeared to be faced with a battalion of snipers because there were no heavy supporting weapons, but every time they had a crash, they suffered casualties. Without upsetting people's thoughts about this one, see, the difference between our method of fighting and American method of fighting was the fact that the Americans, having such a massive volume of firepower, they let go a lot of ammunition, they fired all over the place. They may have hit one or two people, I don't know, but so far as we were concerned, all that ammunition had to be carried, and there wasn't that much of it. And so the whole withdrawal from Kokoda was because we had no food and no ammunition.
Well, the question that's down here, but you've probably answered it, how well equipped do you think the 39th was for what lay ahead? So in your very early days, how well equipped were you?
Well, now, we were fully equipped, so far as weapons were concerned, on the standard as laid down in the equipment table. And we were, I think, the first unit that was fully equipped with one Thompson submachine gun to each section. We were, that part of it was all right. Food, no, there were problems with the food because of the type of food, the way it had to be carried, one thing or another. So when the unit moved forward, all food and stores had to be carried by carriers. And if you keep a carrier working forward of you, in 14 days he's eaten everything he's carried up. So that's not very helpful. You've got to, it was very difficult to try and get food up, very difficult to try and get things of that nature. A carrier was not supposed to be carrying ammunition, but they did do. And later,
even in the early stages?
He wasn't supposed to be carrying ammunition, because we're supposed to carry our own ammunition, but there's a limit to how much you can carry. The packs were limited, or haversacks. In other words, the personal carry pack was supposed to be limited at 15 pounds. And that includes your personal gear and things of that nature. But then, on top of that, there were bandoliers of ammunition, or there were bombs for this, that and the other. And see, after all, each hand grenade weighs 3 pounds. And it makes it a bit difficult. You can't carry that all forward, and ammunition and food. And of course, so far as we were concerned, food ran out pretty quickly too. And
so what did you do to lighten your pack to bring it down to 15 pounds?
Oh, before we started, all sorts of wonderful ideas and inventions, like take half a toothbrush handle off and travel with half a towel, half a blanket, the ground sheet. But that was all very well in the lower parts of the track, but as you got higher, the altitude increased, so it got colder. And people don't realise that on the very high peaks there, you get snow.
And you had half a blanket.
Half a blanket. The natives suffered considerably from this. They were doing the best they could do, carrying the best they could carry, but as it got colder, they go a horrible sort of a grey colour, and they suffered with pneumonia badly, a lot of pneumonia.
So this was your first experience in another country, first overseas experience?
Yes, yeah.
How did you feel about that then? Did you have time for it to make an impact?
Yeah, our first period of time, you see, from really, we got there in January of 1942. And we had a few months, but I personally found it extremely interesting. I like to see how other people do things, and I found it extremely interesting. In fact, we got on very well, the 39th got on very well with the native people, because our early officers, senior officers, were all first RAF men. they all had schooled us more or less in what to do and how to do it. And so we didn't disturb the natives over much. We did what we could to keep a rather minor role if it comes to that. There were no Japanese at that time, only air bombing and that sort of thing, until late June. But as far as that was concerned, the natives were somewhat unreliable in places. Around the coast area near us, they were pretty right, but some of the others were a bit unreliable. They'd had a very bad time previously with the Germans, because don't forget New Guinea was half German, and they were not very keen on any white man. The Japanese, fortunately, gave them a worse time, and so that was about really the reason for them. But then later, we were the 39th. We were a bit lucky because we could go in some of those areas where the other Australian troops were not very welcome at all. We could move into Kokoda country, whereas otherwise, unless you left some steel for the cooker to get, it didn't come out with a head on.
So what, your cookers, cannibalism?
Yeah.
Cannibal.
Oh, they were headhunters.
Headhunters.
Yes, but the cannibalism is common in most of those peoples, but it's not under, it's a more religious sort of thing. See, if Auntie dies, then you eat a bit of Auntie, well, you've got Auntie spirit, you see, and this is all very well. But the other, now one thing about that, I better deal with it later. I was going to say, when the Kokoda Track show really first started, we were in the opposite mess at Moresby. All the officers had been called up from their various outstations to a mess, general mess. When I was finishing off, the commanding officer, who was then still Yukon on, he said, the 2IC would like a word to you after this mess. Stop where you are, please. And he left the mess room. And Dorb Keller, who was the 2IC at the time, he got up and he said, well, gentlemen, you've burnt your boats behind you. You can expect no reinforcements of men, material, or other suppliers. You will fight until fight until your ammunition is expended. You'll then use your bayonet if you can. There will be no surrender. After the time, if you are fortunate, you may be able to retire in small groups to the west and persuade the natives to run you down to Australia. Forgetting, of course, that between the track generally over to Kokoda and Buna, going to those places, were the track to the left of it were notorious headhunters, what we used to call tiger country. So there will probably have been very little chance, if you're on the defeated side, of getting away satisfactorily to Australia. However, that matter didn't rise, so there it was. But it was not a very resounding farewell, because his last words were, well, good luck, and there.
And that's it.
Yeah.
The McDouey. I mean, I'll come back to that.
Yeah, that's all right, yeah.
But the McDouey, what can you remember about the McDouey?
Right, McDouey, well, I've got a bit of a feeling of this personally too, I'll tell you in a minute. But McDouey was a very nice ship, Burns Phillips ship, used to bring the supplies up to New Guinea. It was a refrigerated ship and they could bring the supplies up to New Guinea. The Japanese, of course, also realised this, and they were rather anxious to get McDouey. We were responsible for unloading McDouey, and On one particular occasion, when I was doing the brigade anti-aircraft defences 7 miles home, Colonel Owen had taken command of the battalion, and Colonel Owen said, I want a meeting with some of you people after you come over here. And he was talking to us. He said, now you've got to unload McDewey in the morning. Now, will you take your men down onto McDewey? And I said, very good, sir. Look, will you get somebody to take over this brigade anti-aircraft job? He said, oh, I forgot you were doing that. Now you stop where you are, Ted. You take your men down to the McDewey. There's Ted Money and from the 20th Machine Gun Platoon, and C Company troops went down to unload the McDewey. The Japanese brought in 27 medium bombers with a direct intention of trying to get McDewey. And McDewey put out into Fairfax Harbour and tried to get underway with our troops on board, trying to get underway so that she could dodge if possible. She received 1 bomb, I think, on that day, but covered and damaged the ship generally. The next day, doing the same sort of thing, she received 2 direct hits. One, I think from memory, was 8 feet behind the bridge. Another one was in a fire hold. However, the one behind the bridge went down 3 decks and burst into the saloon. And in the saloon there was Ted Bunny, Ross McLeod, one of the ship's senior officers. They were all sharing a tin of peaches. Well, and of course they all became casualties. Ted Bunny died 2 days afterwards. He was blown up 2 companionways and half out of his long boots. Badly burned in the back. And we lost in all 8 people on board the McDewey. She drifted out into the harbour a bit beyond the village of Hanna-Barbera, and she sank there on fire. She sank there, rolled on the side, and she's still there, half in, half out of water.
So it's still visible?
Oh yes, still quite readily visible, yes. It looks rusty now. When I saw her 25 years and then 30 years later, she's still there. The rust has obviously increased on her, of course, and some of the old previous paint had worn, so the name underneath McDewey was Fu Chow, and that showed later, but there she is. And it was a rather sad story, that, because I very much feel the fact that I was first supposed to be the one that took the troops on board, and later to pretend my very close mate from the battalion, and close mate from the previous battalion. I think we only had a 1-figure difference in the regimental serial number. He got the task of doing that job. He suffered and died for it.
Can you remember how you felt when you personally came under attack?
Yes, that's a bit of a funny one, because when I first came under attack, but long before the track, I was moving my platoon down south coast, and we were going across the sand blow. I had them 3 sections, 2 sections, one to the left, one to the right, and the reserve section behind my headquarters. I heard aircraft coming down the coast, the Japanese fighter aircraft, and they flipped over a ridge, a little rise really, just in front, almost at my level, almost at our level really, and I told them, I deployed the troops more, and I called out loud and said, don't lay down, keep standing and keep going, because I realised that the Japanese would be just as surprised to see us as we were to see them. And no good laying down, because that makes a better target for an aircraft. If you're standing up, you'll be out of the road before anything could really happen. However, tail end Charlie dipped his nose a little bit and let go a burst. And the fire, I could see the bullets hitting the sand. They ran up straight between the two sections. But to both sides of me, they must have been about 20 yards apart. But they didn't hit anybody, but fortunately and automatically I'd done the right thing. I was very pleased about that, and nobody had been hurt. And not only that, it gave them all their first experience of getting shot at. But,
so over time, when this sort of thing happened repeatedly, did the feelings change, or?
Always. As far as I was concerned, the feeling just uncertainty really about it all. When this sort of thing was happening, I was hoping I was doing the right thing. I had that feeling of uncertainty, not of fear as such, because I had other things on my mind than fear. But that became less when I got the feeling to appreciate where or how the fire would be coming, or what it would be. I was asleep on one occasion, I forget where it was, but I was dreaming that I was back as much where the trains used to shut and put trucks on, you know, and they did the clang, clang, bang, bang on the railway trucks, and then there's the chuff, chuff, chuff from the steam engines they were in those days. And I suddenly realised in my sleep, we've got no trains up here, but what I could hear was the Japanese mountain battery firing and the shells coming overhead, but they were so slow and glossy, they were a chuff, chuff, chuff noise with the shell, then bursting on the hill behind. And that awakened me. But it happened before that. And on another occasion, during a full-scale air raid, I was having a sleep when it happened. I didn't hear the alarm. My sergeant did, he looked after everything. And then I heard the all clear, and I wakened up and I thought it was the alarm. And he said, it's all right, you go to sleep again, you need the rest. I said, what to do? He said, that's the all clear. I didn't want to disturb you with the alarm. But that was the way it used to be. Of course, there was that tension, you know, you were tense because you had to have, your nerves were a very high pitch when you came in contact with that sort of thing, because really, you know, really, you had no proper sleep. You had no proper sleep. You had to ensure that there was somebody watching all the while. You had to ensure that proper things were done. Fortunately, an officer probably, because he had other things to worry about, was a little bit less troubled with that fear business than others. An example, on one occasion when I had a shelter beneath a tree, I had a box beside me in which I kept my razor, and I had a Rolls razor in the tin, a few things. My bed was right beside that when I lay down. And I heard a crack and I sat up very quickly. A branch from the tree fell down and broke the razor and hit my pillow. I had to get another home from the razor.
So you could sit up before the tree landed?
Yeah, before it came down. So I heard the crack and that was set me up. And that's how, I mean, you can't be sound asleep if that happens, really.
we've already heard that when you set out on the track you were wished good luck and virtually you were on your own. But how did you feel as you started out on the track?
Well, my task was given to me as it was a duty to take my men, pick the others up at the Sajuri corner, Sajuri corner, and then take them on and follow on. I was one of the persons who was supposed to follow on. And so we got rid of the gear we didn't need. We prepared and we moved off to do what was required of us.
So the hardships on the track, you just came across them. It was your duty to do.
Yes, well, we did not know what was ahead. We did not know what the track was like. It was before any of the golden staircases, as they call them today, had been put in place. And it was simply a native footpad. And with all native footpads, they go in at one end and they come out the other end. But as you go uphill, if it's zigzag, then you know it's probably too steep to walk up in boots, because a goat can't walk up like that either. So then you have got to try and organise yourself up. But we all got and carried staff to assist. That was absolutely necessary.
That was cut from the jungle? You cut them from the jungle?
Cut them those days, yes, we cut them.
So did you get any help from your leaders? Or?
Well, I say no. By help, if you mean really intelligent help, no. We got assistance from those who were fit, and more fit than the other younger members. They would help by carrying some of the gear, carting it up. I went a very short way originally up the track because I was taken ill. I got a relapse of malaria. And so I had to hand over my platoon to Johnson, I think it was from memory. And Johnson went on then.
Is that the Johnson at Minari?
Yeah.
Alright.
And when I was able to move on from there, I had a separate task. My task was then really to look after sniper instruction and snipers within the battalion. But I wasn't faced with the same sort of problems walking the track. I'd been more or less used to walking mountains. And that was all right.
Civilian life?
Yes.
From before you went there?
And that was all right. But I hadn't been used to walking mountains like those were. And whilst we're talking about that, at Aitiki, on the Sajiri Plateau, that's to the right on the eastern side of it, there's this Aitiki plantation. A little bit further on is Aitiki Numu. When you get to Aitiki Numu, if you go to the edge there and look, and I don't know whether anybody had bothered to look there, there's a massive valley that extends from there to as far as you can see in a straight line. And it drops from the Aitiki Numu and on the plateau down, I suppose, nearly, well, at least a good 1,000 feet on about a 60-degree level down to the bottom. And then over a little bit to the west of it, the mountain, the valley rises, so it's almost like a one-sided gorge. But you can look down on the gum trees, look like little bushes down the bottom, and they're looking way down, straight down. My wild guess was you could look as far down there as Efogi. But they didn't go that way. They walked over the native track, which went around the other villages on the way and up through Kokoda, up through Efogi, Kagi, up into Ishirava, Kokoda, that way. I reported when I got a chance about this valley, because I think with a little bit of work, you could have taken armour down there without any trouble. And when I spoke to a senior officer about that, he said, yes, and don't forget, we didn't have any armour, but the Japanese didn't. They could bring theirs back there, it's the same as you could take it down. And anyhow, that was that one. But that was a very interesting point there. And then the native track, you see, a native doesn't worry about contours. You go from point A to point B, up and down. He doesn't like going around. And also, he doesn't want to transgress on another people's land. Because if he does that, he'd lose his head so fast it doesn't matter. That's not much help to him. So we went. And matter of fact, we did it in comparatively good time. Our walk to Kokoda, I didn't go to Kokoda, not that far, not then. Now, was there ever a typical day on the track? They're all fairly typical. It made it from 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it rained regularly. It was extremely wet, and it was a very uncomfortable situation one way or another. But also it had a great number of leeches down the bottom. The valley, that's still on. Well, as I say, my few days on the track, I don't know that there's anything very, other than being the track. It just got a little bit more difficult, more wearying every day you went up it. It was all. And the other thing that you used to, as you're climbing, you look, you can see a crest. You think, well, when you get to the crest, then you've got to go downhill. Now, downhill is getting as bad as going uphill, because your knees start to play up. But when you get to the crest, you're not going downhill, you're only looking across to the next one. And that goes up again.
Well, the track is isolated. How did the isolation affect you?
No worry, because we had so many troops. We were all together.
So that's a physical, you had a...
Yes, we were all together. I mean, we could, not only that, some were worse off than others. We tried to help those who were worse off. I've seen some so weary that they just simply laid down the side of the track and vomited because they couldn't go on.
So mateship was particularly important then?
Yeah.
Mateship.
Yes, they were all part of the unit. You were a part of the whole thing. And I think that overcame the feeling of isolation. It, of course, I got a little bit of an advantage there, because as a young kid, you see, I used to run around mountains. I was never very afraid of them. In fact, I fell down them quite frequently. And,
but what about contact with home? Because these are young boys away from home for the first time.
Oh, well, some of them were starting to feel a little bit homesick, but the others, as I say, they were bushy, and they made it pretty well together. They didn't seem to worry, except that they were feeling pretty close about the people. They couldn't communicate on the road, naturally. They couldn't write a letter on the road, fortunately, because I had to censor it if they did.
Did they receive letters?
No, nothing on the...
Once they started on the track, that was it?
That was it. They were off, yes, that's it. Even administratively, they were on their own, because the army didn't get much sense out of it. Once you started on that, you started off on the way, and that was it. That was all about it, till you got the other end. And then, when you got to the other end, of course that was the sharp end, and everybody was too busy worrying about other things.
Well, we've got this isolated track, the weather, the rain, etc.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the rain and the sleeping,
yeah.
How it affected your day-to-day
Well,
living.
Every night, of course, everybody was in a state of comparative exhaustion, but the rain made it well, impossible to become comfortable, particularly in those early days because we didn't have rest houses. And we had a ground sheet that wasn't much good. And that was where I learnt that if you're sleeping in a pool of water, don't roll over in it because the other part of the water's cold.
You learnt quickly.
Yeah. Also, if there's any wallabies about, kick them out because they got a warm spot underneath their bush.
Oh. Did you come much in contact with native animals?
Wallabies, a few wallabies about, not much else. No, everything been frightened away.
Right. Well, can you describe the jungle? Because that would have been your first experience in jungle, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, jungle is tropical rainforest interspersed with creepers, tropical creepers, and every tropical creeper grows a thorn about 1.5 inches long. And if you try to walk off the track and forget it, it'll literally tear the clothing off you. And I found in one spot there, bloke said, oh, here's a crashed aircraft. He was off the track a little bit. And I said, well, he's sitting by where I am. I could not see the crashed aircraft for the bushes and scrub. And when I tried to walk in, forgetting the green ants and forgetting the prickles. Now, the green ants, another thing. They were walking along to get their feed. You'll see them in the, like Pilgrim's Progress, walking down the branches of these various little trees and the like. But if you touch a tree, they're all over you and they bite fiercely. Before going up the track, well before, I borrowed a bicycle, push bicycle one time to go down to where another platoon was. And I rested the bike on a tree, little tree, and went in to speak. And when I came back, everything, including the spokes and wheels, had green ants walking up and down. And I had to pick up the bike and bounce it to get them off before I dare get on it.
Ow. What about snakes or any other?
No, interestingly enough, I saw no snakes at that time. A python, or the odd python down in the valley, but otherwise no snakes. No snakes. There was nothing for the feet on with it when the boys were walking down the track, so they got it out of their own. The little smaller snakes, so taipans and black snake, no, not at that time.
So this jungle that you couldn't see through, was that something to be frightened of or in awe of or respect or?
To be annoyed with.
Oh.
That's about what it amounted to, annoyed with. If you wanted to get through it, then it was impenetrable.
What about the river crossing?
No, I didn't like river crossing. Now, river crossings are not made for people of my height. The natives walk over on a log. They're not wearing boots. They don't have much trouble with their big toes. They can hang on like a thumb. But they go across and these logs are all slippery. And I started to become somewhat proficient in going over there. But when you come to over a gorge or something and you've got a log bridge, or a river, a log bridge, where somebody's pulled a cordle on the top of it, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm going to use the cord at all, I haven't got my feet on the ground. And that's no help at all. So I dislike river crossings very much. Wherever possible, I avoided them. I'd rather go and get a bit wet than do that. But the river can rise there overnight almost. You get a rain in it, and it'll rise overnight until it becomes uncrossable, until it goes down again.
Did you have any comfort at all?
Oh. Well, not that I could remember.
Was there anything to laugh at?
Oh yes, there's always plenty of things to laugh at. If you didn't laugh, you go silly.
Oh.
Yes, there's always things to laugh at.
Can you think of an example?
Hmm?
Can you think of an example?
No, not offhand, but a soldier's life has always got humour with it of some sort or another. And not like the native peoples, where the boss boy carries a stick, and if they don't do the right thing, he gives them a smack, and when he gives a smack, everybody else laughs at him.
Oh.
But that's different. And no, I think that a soldier's life is so bound up with a soldier's life that he hasn't got to worry too much about that sort of thing.
Well, we know that you were wounded and at times ill. Can you tell us your story in that?
Oh. Well, the story, and that briefly, is that it all happened so quickly. You always realise that it might happen, whereas then all of a sudden it happens. And the discomfort from that, you've got to try and do something about rectifying it. If you get a positive attitude and try and do something to restore the condition the best you can. I don't think that there's much else you can say about that. As far as I was concerned, I got blown up on one occasion. But all right, I realised something was liable to happen like that because of the condition that existed, or the situation that existed. But I was unable to take any additional cover. And then I certainly didn't expect to get damaged the way I was damaged. But there were 3 explosions, and the second 2 I saw reflected from the overcast while I was blowing backwards from the first one. And I was blown back. It was over what was been the foundation for a house, and that's what broke my back, and I came down backwards on that. And then I was in pain. I was also filthy dirty from mud, bleeding in the nose and ears, and I couldn't hear the thing. But it was all so quick. And I didn't lose consciousness, I was just knocked a bit silly with it. On another occasion I did lose consciousness, but it was a different thing altogether. And no, I don't think there's much. I think really to try and develop a positive attitude. If that happens, try to fix it in some way, or ask somebody else if they can. Because there's nothing much else you can do about it, otherwise you're a nuisance to everybody. That was an ordinary form of wounding like that. But I have seen some dreadful things. And some of the worst things I've seen in actual burn. By burns I mean until the body is burnt like a piece of pork, so that it got crackling on it, and every time it breathes a crackling open you can see through that subcutaneous tissue underneath. That's not good. It's horrible. But I like to put that away behind me. I said some years ago now, and they can stop there as far as I'm concerned.
Well, when you were injured, how were you cared for?
Yeah, assisted back to where I do, where my quarters were, and there I lay down and tried to administer the platoon from my quarters. I just was not. There was no doctor within 13 miles of me, and I didn't realise that my back was broken, but I knew it was sore, very sore, and that's probably what kept me going, so that I'm not in the cot today. And that was what the officer said later, David the officer, not I, but David.
The doctor?
Yeah, he was a specialist in that sort of thing, I think. And he said, you're very lucky that you kept moving, because if you hadn't kept moving, you'd have been in a cot for life. But you developed the muscles around beside the break.
So with that break, you had to keep on climbing and descending, or climbing and climbing?
Oh, no, yes, it limited me to what I could do naturally, because not only the break, but also the disc problems. If I did, in fact, even to this day, if I give myself any sort of exertion like that, I start to get a wicked backache now out of it all, because after all, the vertebrae pressing onto one another makes it quite painful. I also think I lost an inch of my height, not that I had much to start with.
Did you ever have to rely on the natives to care for you?
Yes. Yes, that happened a couple of times. As a matter of fact, one native became with me, very friendly native. When he first came to me, I'd been laid on a church pew with a very bad attack of malaria. It's a mission church pew, I mean. And my temperature was very high. I couldn't turn my eyes. I had to turn my head. Couldn't turn the eyes in the socket properly. And I had no water to get at all. My enamel mug was beside me. And this native came in the door, and he was done up in his regalia to a certain extent. He had his bone through his nose, and he had his arrow guard on his wrist, and he had his armour on, without the chest of him. And he walked up and he looked at me, and he didn't speak any English, and so I pointed to my cup. I spoke to him in Māori dialects. They had no water in there, Ronnie Lassie. And he just took the cup, and I thought, well, there goes my cup's enamelled ship, that's for sure. And he went off with that, and he came back later on with full of water. And he stuck his dirty finger in the water, wiggled it around, he says, Rana, which is water, drinking water. And so I was very pleased about that. And he just sat on the bed and looked at me and didn't bring me any food. And then when I had a drink of water, he took it, refilled it and put it back there. And he made himself then quite comfy with me, and he stopped there to look after me for a few days. Without being asked to speak anything, I learned a little bit from him and he learned a little bit from me.
Where did you get it from in the beginning though?
Oh, the native peoples I've been with down there where I've been places bootless. I was fairly close with those villages. I moved in, I'd like to move in and hear something, a few mission kiddies there, and they could translate stuff, and I found it was very interesting down there, because I got a bit of the story about the initial development, initial origin of those people. They had China in them, they were crossed with Chinese somewhere way back along the line. And that's, I saw a lot of things about that, and that was not the track, but I also realised then that they navigated their ocean-going latitories, they were latitory, not a lacatory, a latitory, with the Egyptian sextant. They got the Egyptian sextant over there, and a few things of that nature. No, but that's how I first got to, and then they were happy because I was trying to find out something that they knew. It was cooperative. And
did he eventually bring you food as well?
Yes. Once he realised that my temperature was going down, he first brought that custard apple to me.
Oh.
Yes.
Right.
Then he brought a pawpaw type of thing, you know. And what I didn't want then was a lemon, so I asked him for a Sapporo, which is a lemon lobster, that sort of thing. And he got a couple of those in there. I was right, I was on the way out then, I was getting better then. So we were right. So he stuck with me then, from then on until they formed New Guinea Papua Battalion. And then I introduced him to them. I think he went into the Papua History Battalion, because when I went up there 25 years later, he was in the hospital up there with an injured ankle, and he came out to see me.
And he remembered you?
He remembered me.
All those years later?
Yeah. And
so when you left that mission place where you were ill, did he actually escort you or go with you?
Oh, he walked with me to see if he could help anyway. He was poking out almost like a batman for me, you see. He's getting things if I wanted them, and he'd make a camp bed, that sort of thing. He's very good at doing that. But that wasn't on the track, that was over it, yeah. And the other thing, the natives in the south of the outstanding ridges, Deniki, you know, the natives in the south, the carriers, would never go to the north. Days gone by, used to have to be a separate carrier line from there on. And I personally think that the word Deniki is a corruption of the Motu word Dakani.
Which means what?
Dakani means blessing it be upon you, and that was where they paid off their carriers.
Oh, right. Oh, didn't know that. If we move along, how did you get off the track?
Quite frankly, I just do not remember. I cannot remember how I got off the track.
You were sick with malaria.
Yeah, but that was
in an ambulance.
Yeah, but that was after. Oh, that was from Beatrice earlier on. No, how I don't know. You see, that is a blank. I know when I had got off the track, Edwards caught up with me on a little bit of flat going down towards Moresby. But no, I don't know. I must be thinking of nice things because I don't know how I got off the track.
Well, at what stage were you in the ambulance that was attacked?
That was from Bootless. That was in the Bootless Hospital. That's before I went up the track.
Early on. Do you want to mention that?
No, I think I did mention it, didn't I? Well, yeah, the matter of the ambulance, I had been in the Bootless, what they call the Bootless Hospital, so the Heidelberger got listed as Bootless Hospital, but as far as I was concerned it was a Marageta mission. Marageta mission, by the way, Marageta pronounced. And anyhow, I was not in a very good condition and just query blackwater fever. The ambulance brought some stores down for the mission station, for the hospital thing there, aid posts, whatever you call it. So they said, we'll send you back to 109 Hospital. So I got in the bottom right-hand berth of the ambulance. Now all those ambulances, the silencers were gone, and the jockey riding beside the driver had the hatch open so he could get out and see what was going on. I look up through them and see what was going on. And we drove up, coming into the bottom of the 7 Mile airstrip, and I could hear fighter aircraft. The next thing, the ambulance dived off into the table drain at the side, and there's a dreadful crash through the ambulance, and it's full of 3-ply splinters. And I realised a burst of fighter aircraft fire had gone straight through the top right-hand side of the ambulance, diagonally across it and out the other bottom left-hand side, going over the top of me, and I was shattered and splintered by the top berth, really.
But there was nobody in the top berth?
No, I was the only one in the ambulance. So that's when the driver came and said, are you all right in there? And I said, well, I'm not going to bother with you, to ride with you anymore. But from there I can't remember how I got to 109 Hospital.
Well, how did you get out of 109 Hospital?
Subsequently I was discharged at 8 o'clock at night with a haversack, a water bottle. I had my pistol, fortunately.
And ammunition?
Yeah, I always carry ammunition. And I was directed up the track and up past Rona, up on the lower level, up past the jury. Then just keep going on that track and you'll come across your unit. Well, I didn't come across my unit actually. When I got to the top end of the jury, I found the con depot. I thought it was too far to go on tonight. I'll go and see if they could give me a bit of accommodation tonight in here. So I popped in and the adjutant went out and sleep behind the table late at night then, or perhaps it was early in the morning.
You were walking alone?
Yeah, walking alone. And I told him, he said, oh, you should pop down there, see the old man in the morning in here. And Joe Thorpe was looking after the hospital then, the con depot. So I went down and he showed me a berth. Then I went down into a tent and it was empty. And a bed was made up ready, waiting for it. And in the morning, Joe Thorpe, I went up and saw Joe Thorpe, and he had seen me in the tent without saying, and he'd gone up to the office to see what sort of admission there had been fixed for me, if anything, you see. And he said, "Where'd you come from?" And I told him. I said, "Why are they sending you up here?" I said, "I discharged from hospital to go to my unit." And he ran his finger up my ribs. I had ribs then. And he said, "Oh, I think we'll keep you here for about a fortnight." And I was taken in on strength to Con Depot for a fortnight as a patient. And that fortnight developed into a couple of months in all, or a month anyway.
As a patient?
It started off as a patient, and then stopping there, he said, "Now I'm going to put you in charge of getting some anti-malarial work done around here I want done." And so I took 2 native anti-malarial parties and I looked after them on there until I was fit enough to get back. And then the unit put in a request for me because they wanted to give me other tasks, you see. But anyhow, that was that part.
Well, how did you actually finish your service with the 39th?
I'd had another bad attack of malaria, and I'd been put into an advanced dressing station on the track run by 4th Field Ambulance. Dr. Wallman was the captain in charge of that. And after I'd been there for some time, Wallman said, "I'm going to send you back." And he said, "We get you back to GDD at Murray Barracks. And they can examine you then and see what the strength is, but you better go back to Australia because," he said, "you're so full of malaria, you're only going to be a nuisance to everybody, yourself and everybody else if you kept up here." And so then I was sent back, but don't ask me how I got back. I haven't got the faintest idea. I don't remember after that at all. I can't remember then getting into the what do you call it, at Murray Barracks, because I was a little bit cross with what happened. I came back and I toddled in there and reported in, and I was wearing my badger rank on this shirt because it was the only shirt I had out upon, the only shirt I had. And he said, "What do you want, mate?" And the bloke behind was on reporting in. He said, "Oh, if you go down that hut down there, get on the wall there overnight, in the morning we'll see what we can do for you." And that hut had so much shrapnel and part of the lid blown off. I got in there, some of the New Guinea volunteer rifles were there. They said, "What are you doing here?" And I told her, Ramsey was one, by the way, and Hickok and a couple of other villains from up there. And they said, "Well, get yourself a spot down there. Don't get up against the wall, because the rats are bad in there. Some they'll bite you if you go on the wall. They're running around along the wall, you see." Well, he said, "We've had a couple of people bitten on that wall there." So I thought, "I'll get it under the table." They said, "Well, that's not a bad idea, because if it rains, the rain won't go through the table, will it?" Yeah. That was a nice, comfortable doss. I got in the morning and I said, popped around. I saw the medicos and they said, "Well, we're going to book you in the ship to go back." And so this is how I got out of New Guinea. So I was booked on a ship to go back, and the anti-barb adjutant said to me, "You'd about the right size for the job we want." I said, "What's that?" They said, "We've got to go in and get the last of the smelted gold out of Bulalo. But it's got to be somebody small enough to get in the DC2 in between that luggage rack there. You have to ride it standing up, because when the gold's put in those racks, it mustn't slide out, it's too heavy. It'll have to be put in there. You can keep the cases back in the rack, but you can fit in there." I said, "Right, I'll do that." So that's what I did. And I bought out 1,100 pound dead weight in gold. And then we said, "We put you on another ship." Then on the other ship, they didn't just put me on the other ship. You can escort the gold back to Australia, and at the same time it can be embarkation, disembarkation on the Matsika, the Dutch liner, my ship. And so fair enough, I get down to Matsika with the gold and got a receipt for it going into the strong room of the ship. And they had 30 NGVRs going home for a spot of leave after having those how many years in New Guinea. And so I thought, well, now I'm on this, the first thing I'm going to do is have a decent meal. And when the meal time came, I had a decent meal. That smartly made me sick. But there I saw my accommodation. I was all right in a twin cabin. I was in the cabin with the intelligence officer of the 49th Battalion. His serial number was Q4. So anyhow, we came back and we got out of Morley Harbour on an aircraft red. And so ships started hammering out the road, and then we ran straight into Typhoon Mini. Typhoon Mini sank the Japanese 7th Fleet destroyers, and the things that this ship did was most amazing. It still kept going. It had sliding doors in it, and if those catches were wrong at all, if I tried to work my way around the corridors to see how my poor patients were going down below, and the door slid open, the wind came in, and got under the corridor carpet and flapped it between the deck and the deckhead, and I was hanging on, bouncing on top of floating carpet, as it were, the magic carpet. And so I get to the end and go down and see, and it was a filthy mess down below because these poor blokes, they were seasick to billy-o. And the Japanese food, and the chap sharing the cab with me.
Japanese food, did you say?
Japanese crew.
Oh, crew, sorry.
And then I got my mate in the cabin. He was one of those people that apparently get seasick when they get on board a ship, because he was in such a state that I had to pay 10 bob to get a slice of toast up to him to try and get something into him. Otherwise, I'm in a hospital case.
But you managed all right?
Oh, you did not, I guess, you see. And as the ship rolled, because my Rolls Royce, I put us in the little ledge above the wash basin on the ship. As the ship rolled, I got to plonk. And then the other way, the scissors plonk back. And all this poor bloke saying the other person, take that bloody razor off. But we ultimately got to Townsville. And then I noticed that every one of the NGVR people had a bird of paradise. See, and I said to, I forget his name now, the chapter was, I think it was Captain Hiscock, captain of the leave party. And I said, you're going to get me shot. I said, yeah, I'm disembarkation officer. You formed a mob of your NGVRs, and every one of them's got a kingbird's feather. I said, they're worth £50 for the customs each one if you get picked up with them. And he said, oh, they won't be noticed. Tell you why, they won't be noticed. I wish I had your confidence. I said, well, I'm going to have to clear them, you know, there's no time. So I went out first and cleared the gold. That was what they were really important. They were worried about that. So I got a number of signatures on that. That was out. That was away. Then off came the NGVR. Their hats were turned up on the side. They have the badge in the front. But every hat was turned up with bird of paradise feathers like the light horse. And they walked straight past the customs and off the wharf.
No questions asked. No questions asked.
No, that was part of the uniform. No, it's like... So then, Hitchcock and I, then the driver was there to be taken. I had to go. I said, you have to go to quarantine. The driver said, I'll drive to quarantine. So Hitchcock said, the Victoria pub, and he's on the way. Pull into the side of the Victoria pub, will you please, driver? Well, I'm supposed to take you to quarantine. That's right, you're going to do that. But drop in the pub. And so we pulled over outside. I went and had a couple of good beers with him before I went down to the quarantine station. And that wasn't a very comfortable, nice place either. So from the quarantine station, after about a week, I got put on wounded for a hospital train, in other words, to go south. Now that's narrow gauge from there south in those days. And as the narrow gauge winds, so it pitches here and there. And very fortunately, I'd anticipated the type of treatment I'd get when I finally got on there. And I'd filled my water bottle and grabbed 2 tins of woolly beef and 2 packets of biscuits. And then in the carriage with me, about 3 others on the forward to a carriage and that thing. And that's the only train I've been on that's been 24 hours late in the day. It was shunted onto a loop line while the troop trains came up. And we had no food, no water, no consideration. And I said, well, between the 4 of us, we'll share a tin of bully and a packet of bickies.
The others didn't have anything?
Nothing. So I got that. That lasted us until we got down to Brisbane. All of that loss. It was 3 days I had to get to Brisbane. And then at Brisbane we got into a bigger train. And that had the berths running longitudinally down the car, the sleeping berth longitudinally down the car, you know. But that was not much good because I had a top berth, and although I'm very short, every time I sat up I hit my head on the ceiling. That was loud. They got to Albury, then they got aboard a proper train there, one of our trains, and from Albury we whizzed down and then they transferred me to Heidelberg. And I was in Heidelberg for a while. From there ultimately to the Ballarat Convalescent Depot. And after a while there, first looking after their Tropical Diseases Company and half the 39th apparently, because they were nearly all in the Tropical Diseases Company. And the first Independent Company, that's Commando, first Commando, and a couple from Sparrow Force, 2nd 21st, 2nd 22nd. And then I took over the task of adjutant. And I was adjutant of the whole organisation there until the end of the war. At the end of the war, I went out on a reserve, and then I got a notice later asking me if I'd be prepared to act as an instructor in the new militia forces they are forming. And not wanting to be rude, I said medical ground permitting, knowing what a miserable medical condition I had. And I was brought before the tribunal to check, to examine. The tribunal table, Colonel George Wolfe was one of them. Another one was Callanan, that had a team of commandos. And I forget just who the third one was. And Wolfe said to me, "You've been an adjutant." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Why did you volunteer for the Scottish Regiment?" I said, "I didn't." He said, "Well, here's a paper." I said, "No, that's because the drill hall's the nearest one to my home." And he said, "Ah." He told the other two, he said, "Do you want him?" They said, why? He said, "Well, I want him for an adjutant." So I became the adjutant of the 5th Victorian Scottish Regiment. But only for a short while, and then I took over Headquarter Company and Donald Ramsey from Black Watch took over as adjutant.
Was that the same Ramsey that was in...
Sydney?
No.
Sydney Scots, yes.
All right, yes.
No, he's a Sydney Scots now, he's a special something officer. Oh, he's retired now, I think, but I've got his phone number there. I see him every now and again. Yes, he took over, he's a Black Watch bloke. He took over as adjutant, he was a permanent soldier here. And I went and took over command of Headquarter Company. And so that's about the story of my life, except that after leaving there, I went on, the army, by the way, paid for me to do the London Science course. I qualified for I became a health inspector in London Science course. They paid for that. And that was rather nice of them.
So to conclude the interview, have you got any comments about what you think is really important to remember about the New Guinea campaigns?
The New Yes, there is. See, the New Guinea campaign was an Australian Army campaign, principally. No doubt about that at all. And the mateship between the members of the Australian Army was remarkable. And the campaign would have been a complete and utter failure had it not been for that Australian mateship. The ability for one soldier to look after another, for a group of soldiers to look after another, for the group of them to worry about the other. And I've been with the Americans a little, American Marines a little. They haven't got it, they're individuals. The English as an individual. It's really quite astonishing. The Australian is one of a mob. He gets a couple of mates and they stick together through thick and thin and they will support him. They will support him even right to the death.
So where does that come from? Because it's not going to come from your training books.
That doesn't come from the training book. That just comes from the Australian digger as he is.
Character of your digger.
It's a character of the Australian digger. It's unique. And I think that nowadays it's a pity we don't try and ensure that continues, because with the different attitudes you're getting today, I don't know whether it would work the same way. But even before the war, there were never any viciousness. There might have been some brawls, but they were never vicious brawls. Now they're becoming vicious brawls. And it's something I don't think that people realise the importance of that. It is important, and it is of tremendous value.
Do you think that's the most important thing for future generations to learn?
Well, I think so. See, now, the people that walked the track since the war, they've remarked on the hardship and the difficulty and the fact that they have been able to get along together. And they've achieved something doing it together. What else have we got on there? Anything?
Only if there's anything you want to add. You comment on that little cartoon there done by Jack Boland of the 39th Battalion.
Bluey and Curly, one of the figures appearing in the wartime Sun News pictorial. The little stamp on the side, the censorship stamp. This is an envelope I'm holding. Jack Boland used to be rather good at doing these. He'd get the envelopes for chap before they wrote a letter home, and he'd write copy a little Bluey and Curly into it somewhere or another. Then they could write their letter and shove it in the envelope and post it home. And this is the reason why it's all rusted on the back, where it's been really underneath the flap of my tin hat, as a matter of fact.
What, you stored it under your tin hat?
Yes, underneath the hat band inside the tin hat.
You brought it safely home.
So I brought it safely home, yes. It hadn't been posted, this one. So it hasn't been censored, except we've got the stamp in it.